Welcome, dear friend, to a different kind of sea. It is said that in a forgotten corner of the world, where maps grow pale and hesitant, there stands a temple whose heart has not quite finished breathing. From the outside, it appears empty. Stone steps half, swallowed by drifting dust. Columns leaning inward like tired guardians. An entrance draped not in woven cloth, but in shadow. The wind that moves around it is thin and quiet, as if it too is remembering something. We cross the threshold slowly inside. The air is cool and heavy, carrying the faint, dry scent of soot and age. Faint motes of ash drift, lazily in the darkness, rising and falling like slow constellations in a private sky. They turn in the dim light, as though stirred by a breeze that should not exist, moving as if an invisible breath still lingers in the hall. Beneath this quiet dance, beneath the hush and the dust, a story waits. A story carried not in ink or voice, but in ember and stone. It begins with an ancient spark. Whispers tell us that once, long ago, a single ember was coaxed into being beneath the soot, darkened altar that stands at the centre of this temple. It was not an ordinary ember, not a fleeting glow at the end of a stick, but something given with solemn care, as if passed from the sky itself. The keepers of this place believed the ember carried the breath of their ancestors and the memory of forgotten sons. They said that when you stood close enough to it, you could feel a strange warmth, not just on your skin, but within your chest, a gentle echo of all the mornings that had ever been. For generations, the keepers watched over it. They fed it carefully, not with roaring logs, but with slivers of wood and thin curls of oil-soaked fibre. They never left it alone. Day and night, through storms and silence, someone was always there, listening to its faint crackle, watching its soft pulse. We move further into the hall now. The stone underfoot is uneven, cracked in places, but if you notice carefully, there are certain spots that feel different. Slightly warmer, not enough to shock, only enough to make you pause. You stand on such a stone now. The warmth is small, subtle, like the last breath of a fading candle. Impossible. And yet, there it is. The walls around you are not bare. Under the layers of dust and smoke, carvings lie softened by time. Circles of fire spirals that might be flames or suns or both. Hands extended towards small, glowing shapes. Figures seated in rings around a central light. These carvings do not shout, they murmur, they suggest. Some circles are carved deep, with rays extending outward like dawn breaking over a horizon. Others are worn shallow by touch, as though countless fingers traced the same lines during long vigils. It is said the keepers believed fire itself could remember. They imagined that every story told in its glow, every secret whispered beside it, every tear dried by its warmth, left a trace in the ember's quiet heart. Over years, then centuries, the ember grew heavy, not in size, but in memory. The keepers did not write scrolls here. They did not fill shelves with tablets. Their archive was warmth. Their library was light. We move closer to the altar. The altar is simple, a block of stone darkened by smoke, its surface layered with thin traces of ash. The patterns of burn are irregular, like the ghost of many small fires rather than one great flame. Beneath it, hidden from the eye, the ember was said to rest, not exposed, not displayed, but cradled. Some believe the temple was built around it. Others say the ember arrived later, brought by wanderers who carried it cupped between their hands, shielding it from wind and time. No one can say for certain. What remains is the feeling that this hall once pulsed softly with a gentle, living glow. We stand there for a moment in the imagined light. The hall no longer dark, but washed in a steady, amber warmth. Shadows soft, edges blurred, faces lifted toward the glow with closed eyes, breathing in time with the ember's steady flicker. In forgotten evenings, the keepers would sit in silence, their hands folded loosely in their laps. They did not ask the ember for answers. They did not demand visions of the future. They simply kept it alive. That, in itself, was their prayer. Whispers tell us that over the years, the number of keepers began to thin. Children who once learned to sit quietly in the ember's glow grew curious about other things. The distant hills, the passing caravans, the lives unfolding beyond soot, darkened walls. The old rituals persisted, but fewer hands tended them. What was once a shared duty gradually became the devotion of a dwindling few, and still the ember glowed. It glowed for births and goodbyes, for quiet celebrations and unspoken sorrows. It warmed hands, trembling with age, and hands shaking with fear. It is said that on most nights, the temple knew what to do. When the sky softened into indigo and the last traces of daylight clung to the silhouettes of its pillars, The fire in the central courtyard would rise. Gently at first, then with a steady, quiet certainty. The keepers would move like shadows along the stone paths, their robes whispering against the dust. Bowls of oil would be carried with reverence. Wicks would be laid with practiced hands. One by one, small tongues of flame would bloom, stitching a soft circle of light into the gathering dark. It was like the temple's own heartbeat returning after the long stillness of day. But there was one night when the rhythm broke, one night when the flames refused to rise, and that is where we step in now, into the hush of a courtyard waiting for a glow that never comes. Imagine the temple just before this night descended. The outer steps are worn and familiar, smoothed by countless feet unknown to us now. Dust lies in thin layers along the edges, gathering in the carved grooves of stone, as though the earth has been taking slow, shallow breaths. The courtyard itself is wide and open to the sky, framed by pillars leaning ever so slightly inward, like elders bent with time, yet still standing in watch. Along the inner walls, faded frescoes stretch in cracked ribbons of colour. Reds turn to clay, golds dulled to warm dust. On those walls, the story of the fire is told in softened images, robed figures holding bowls of flame, hands raised toward stars, circles of light surrounding a central blaze. You can almost see it as it was. Night after night, the courtyard would glow with small, steady fires, their reflections trembling in shallow pools of oil and in the polished eyes of the carved figures along the walls. The flames would paint shifting patterns on the stone, turning the courtyard into a chamber of living shadows. It is said that travellers who arrived late would see the temple's light from far away, a gentle halo above the rooftops, a promise that somewhere someone was still awake, still tending warmth. This was the way of things. The temple burned to meet the night. The night arrived expecting the glow, until one moonless evening it did not. The day leading into that night was unremarkable. The sun rose, drifted, and sank as it always did. Dust motes floated lazily through the halls. The keepers moved with familiar quiet, sweeping corners, refilling jars, checking wicks. And yet some would later say they felt something, a thickness in the air, a pause between breaths, a sense that the temple itself was listening for something just beyond the edge of hearing. As the last light faded from the sky, the head keeper walked into the courtyard carrying the ancient flame, a small, sheltered coal that had been passed from one generation to the next, never allowed to die, never allowed to wander too far from the altar's heart. This coal had started every fire in the courtyard for as long as anyone could remember. It was the first word in a sentence the temple spoke every night. The other keepers followed, each in their accustomed place. Bowls were set. Oil was poured, its faint, earthy scent rising softly into the cooling air. Wicks were arranged with practiced care. Everything was ready. Everything was as it had always been. The sky above grew darker, the stars sharp without the softening veil of the moon. The head keeper knelt beside the first bowl. With a practiced hand, they leaned the protected coal toward the waiting wick. And nothing. The wick darkened at the point of contact but did not catch. No flame, no small leap of light. Just a thin thread of smoke rising, then vanishing into the night. At first the keepers were not afraid. Such things they thought could happen. Oil sometimes settled strangely. Wicks sometimes needed to be trimmed more finely. They tried again. The coal was shifted slightly, its faint glow still visible, a tiny stubborn heartbeat. Again it touched the wick. Again the wick smouldered and fell quiet. The head keeper frowned, but only slightly. This time another keeper stepped forward, offering a different bowl, a different wick, a different angle. The coal was pressed once more toward waiting fuel. A brief flare, a sigh of orange, then darkness like a thought interrupted. The courtyard, which should by now have been wearing its familiar necklace of small fires, remained bare. The pillars shifted in shadow. The frescoes seemed to watch in muted stillness. Above, the sky had deepened fully into black. No moon hung there, only scattered stars, distant, indifferent, faint. It is said the keepers spoke very little. They were not people of many words to begin with. Their lives had been shaped by ritual, simple motions repeated with care, more breath than voice, more silence than sound. Yet in the quiet, it was possible to feel something stirring. Tonight, we enter that valley softly, letting the hush of its gentle basin guide us deeper into its forgotten heart. Imagine standing at the valley's edge, just as dawn begins its slow approach. Not yet light, not yet dark, a moment suspended between breath and memory. The entrance is narrow, flanked by low stone outcrops that look like the ribs of some ancient creature long reclaimed by dust. Beyond them, the valley widens in a slow, deliberate curve, like cupped hands guarding something fragile. Mist clings low to the ground, veiling old footpaths, softening the shapes of scattered pillars and fallen stones. A quiet stream winds through the valley floor, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the faint first colours of morning. Its sound is barely a whisper, a thin ribbon of water slipping through the silence. This is where we step now, boots sinking into dew, damp earth, breath clouding faintly in the cool air. And ahead, half hidden in the mist, the temple waits, not grand, not imposing, just present. A simple structure of stone with a sloping roof, its walls stained with soot, its windows narrow and dark, as though the last of its warmth has withdrawn deep inside. Tibby-tive exploration. The sanctuary of quiet flames as we cross the valley floor. The mist thins. Fallen branches crack softly beneath our feet, their sounds swallowed quickly by the heavy stillness. Up close, the temple appears older than its stones. Its steps are worn smooth by countless feet. Its threshold bears the faint scorch marks of fires once carried across it. We enter slowly, letting the darkness adjust to our presence. Inside, the air holds the faint, comforting scent of old smoke, like the last memory of a long-extinguished hearth. The walls are carved with gentle patterns, spirals that resemble rising smoke, circles shaped like small suns, hands cupped around tiny flames. These were not symbols of worship, they were invitations, reminders to sit, to breathe, to be present with the warmth that once lived here. It is believed that the people of this valley did not keep fire as a tool, but as a companion. Their flames did not roar. They murmured, they glowed softly in small clay basins, set into carved niches along the walls. Here, fire was tended not to illuminate, but to soothe. The keepers of this place, men, women, and children, sat around the central hearth each night, letting the gentle light gather in their faces, letting the warmth settle into their bones. Some say that in this valley, fire responded to emotion. On nights of sorrow, the flames dimmed to a low, steady glow as if listening with careful attention. On nights of joy, they flickered more playfully, little dances of ember and orange light, reflecting off the carved stone walls. When storms rumbled over the ridge, the flames shivered in sympathy, leaning this way and that with the wind's breath. The valley, it seems, was not simply a place where people lived, but a space where flame itself felt safe enough to become something gentle. At the centre of the temple lies the hearth, a shallow stone basin, darkened by centuries of soot. Even now, long after the flames have faded, the basin holds a quiet significance, as though it remembers every spark that once rested in its cradle. If you place your hand above it, you may feel something faint, not heat exactly, but the memory of heat, a warmth not on the skin, but deep beneath it, somewhere in the soft chambers of the heart. It is here, legend says, that the valley's greatest flame once rested, not a towering blaze, not a fire meant to be seen from afar, but a still, radiant glow that pulsed with the rhythm of human breath. They called it the sleeping fire, not because it was weak, but because it held its strength in quiet reserve, like a heartbeat at rest. This fire did not require tending in the usual sense. It did not demand fuel. The keepers believed it lived on something subtler. The calm presence of those who sat beside it, the steady breaths shared in its glow, the simple warmth of joined company. In this valley, fire did not burn to consume. It burned to keep pace with the soft rhythms of life. But as all things do, the valley changed. Travellers began to take other routes. The keepers grew fewer. Seasons shifted. Streams dried and found new paths. What had once been a sanctuary of gentle tending became quieter, emptier, more spacious in ways that felt less like peace and more like absence. Some say the fire sensed this long before the keepers did. Its glow softened, its warmth thinned, its pulses slowed as if in anticipation of rest. When the last keeper finally sat alone beside the hearth, they are said to have placed their hand on the stone rim and whispered a single phrase, "You may sleep now." And so the fire dimmed, not in sorrow, not in despair, but in permission. The valley did not lose its warmth. It simply folded it inward, the way a child curls into a deeper dream. Tonight, we walk beside them, slowly, gently, as though each step were an act of devotion. Imagine the desert at dusk. The horizon glows with lingering clay, red light. Wind moves like a sigh across the dunes, shifting fine grains into long ribbons that curl and drift like ghostly serpents. And then, silhouettes. A narrow line of figures emerges across the ridge, not in haste, not in fear, but in a long, steady procession. Each carries a lantern upon their back, a small rounded vessel fashioned from soot, dark clay, strapped with woven fibres that cross over the chest. Inside each vessel lies a flame A single flame fragile as a breath, yet untouched by the restless wind. The lanterns glow softly, casting a gentle aura upon the keeper's bowed shoulders and leaving faint halos on the settling dust. To watch them from a distance is to see a moving constellation drifting slowly across a vast, silent sky of sand. This is where the story begins, with wanderers made luminous by what they choose to carry. As we draw closer to these quiet travelers, the desert's hush deepens. Their footsteps fall in unison, not by command, but by a rhythm learned through years of walking together. Leather soles press lightly against warm sand, never sinking deeply, as though the earth itself welcomes their passing. Their faces are calm, not hardened by hardship, but softened by the nature of their task. The flames they bear are said to be descendants, not metaphorically, but living echoes, of the ancient ember once kept burning in the Sut, darkened temple hidden in a far-off valley. When the temple's light began to fade and its keepers grew old, a quiet decision was made. The fire should not remain in one place. It should be shared. It should wander. It should breathe in many lands. So each keeper took a sliver of the ember, not in coal, but in flame, and set out across the earth. Their task was not to teach, nor to preach, but simply to carry the light with care and humility to places where night fell heavily. Villages tucked between mountains, oases hidden beneath date palms, small camps perched near river bends where cold winds whispered through reeds. Wherever the darkness felt too thick, wherever the cold settled too deeply, the keepers brought warmth, not to chase shadows away, but to let the night breathe softly. The desert is not kind to fire. Wind can steal it, heat can exhaust it, sand can bury it. And yet the keepers' flames rarely wavered. It is said they performed a simple ritual each time dusk approached. They would kneel in a circle, lanterns resting before them like sleeping creatures. Hands cupped, they would breathe slowly toward the flames, not blowing, not feeding, just offering breath, a silent promise. Preedy are here. And the flames would respond. Some would grow brighter for a moment, a gentle spark like a nod of acknowledgement. Others would hold steady, quiet, but resolute. Travellers who encountered the keepers spoke of an atmosphere around them, a calmness that settled like fine dust, a warmth softer than desert heat, a sense that these flames knew the hearts of those who carried them. At night, the lanterns cast long, slender shadows that stretched out across the sands like fingers reaching toward the horizon. The procession became a moving tapestry of light and shadow, a low, glowing thread woven across the vast earth. Among the many stories whispered about these luminous wanderers, one stands apart, told softly, as though the desert prefers we hear it only at night. It speaks of a time when the keepers' numbers had dwindled. Their lineage had thinned like smoke in wind. Only a handful remained to carry the light. Among them was a woman, the last keeper born under a star-marked sky, whose steps were said to be so gentle that she did not disturb even resting sandflies. Her flame was small, but steady, glowing with a warmth described as by tender. One night, when the procession camped atop a dune crest beneath a sky empty of moon, a sudden, cold wind swept across the desert. The flames trembled. Shadows twisted. The lanterns shuddered in their frames. Keepers shielded their lanterns with cloaks and hands, bowing low as the wind roared. One by one, their flames went out, not extinguished violently, but folded inward as though choosing to sleep, all but one. The last keeper curled her body around her lantern, cradling it as one might cradle a wounded bird. She whispered words no one else heard. She breathed slowly, letting her warmth wrap around the fading light. For a long time the flame wavered. Then, just before dawn, it steadied. The desert calmed. The wind fell silent, and the first beam of sunlight rose over the dune and kissed the lantern's glass. Those who witnessed it said they felt something ancient stir, a reminder that even the smallest flame can choose to endure if met with gentle devotion. In time, the keepers became rarer. Travel shifted. Paths, sea. Tonight, we stand before it, quiet, unhurried, letting the slow tide of dusk settle around us like a second skin. Imagine approaching the temple in late evening. The sky above is fading into its gentlest colours, pale gold slipping into rose, rose dissolving into cool violet, violet sinking into blue as soft as exhaled breath. The temple stands half buried in drifting dust, its walls worn smooth by the passage of wind and the weight of countless uncounted nights. Its entrance arch rises before you, its surface darkened by soot, black as storm clouds, speckled with fine grey ash caught in every carved groove. This is the Gate of Ash. Carved spirals twist across its stone face, patterns that looked like smoke frozen mid-motion, captured in a silent whirl. Faint traces of burn mark the arch, not sharp or violent but softened, as if fire once leaned gently against it, whispering secrets into its pores. The ground before the gate holds a thin layer of pale, grey ash, light as breath, soft as forgotten snow. When you step close, the dust shifts around your feet with a faint sigh, as though the gate remembers footsteps from ages when the temple still breathed fire. You wait, you say nothing. Dusk deepens. The air grows expectant, and then something changes. Whispers tell us the gate opened only at dusk, because that was the hour when the world was willing to soften its boundaries. Day insists on clarity. Night drapes itself in shadow. But dusk is neither, a quiet in-between where old rules loosen and forgotten paths stir awake. As the light fades, a thin glow emerges around the dust, dark arch, not bright, more like the memory of fire than fire itself. The ash on the ground lifts slightly, curling upward in tiny spirals that mimic the carvings on the stone. The air warms by a single degree, barely enough to notice yet unmistakable, a warmth that does not belong to the cooling evening. With a soft, nearly inaudible sound, a sound like embers shifting in a dying hearth. The gate opens, not by swinging, not by grinding stone. It simply yields. The air thins. A shimmer passes through the archway, and what was once solid becomes passable. We step through. Inside, the temple's inner sanctum opens in quiet shadow. The air smells faintly of old embers, warm, dusty, reminiscent of stories told beside a dying fire. Here, along the walls, lie thick layers of ash, soft and undisturbed, as if no foot has crossed this space in generations. But these ashes are not remnants of destruction. They are not ruins of burned offerings. They are memories. Offerings released into flame so that they could return as smoke, rise into spirals, and settle again in stillness until dusk called them gently awake. The ash on the floor holds stories. Petitions whispered through trembling hands, hopes laid carefully in small fire bowls, sorrows that drifted upward in thin, white lines before dissolving into the air. The sanctum is a chamber of old wishes, and the gate is its threshold, a guardian of what should stay quiet until the world is gentle enough to hear. At the centre of the chamber stands a low stone altar. Its edges are so soft with soot that they appear blurred even up close. Fine grey ash coats its surface entirely, as though 1,000 fires left their final breath upon it before sinking into sleep. It is said the people who tended this place would come at dusk carrying small bowls of flame. They would sit around the altar in a circle, not speaking, not praying in the way we imagine, but breathing with the fire, letting flame and breath align in slow ritual. When the flames died, they did not wipe away the ashes. They let them gather, layer upon layer, year after year, silence upon silence. They believed each layer was a memory honoured, a wish released, a burden lightened. Here, ash was not final, it was a resting place. A soft bed of stories that once rose into the air like thin white birds before settling home again. We run our fingers over the surface. The ash shifts barely, like something breathing beneath it. Perhaps it remembers hands that once rested here. Perhaps it remembers warmth. Perhaps some memories cling lightly to the cool chambers of this place. Not haunting, just lingering, as forgotten things often do. Why did the gate open only at dusk? The question moves in soft circles, like ash caught in a current of warm air. Some believe dusk was the hour when fire spirits wandered most freely, slipping between day's strict brightness and night's deep silence. Others think the ash itself held a kind of memory that recognized twilight, a brief echo of every fire that had ever burned in the valley. But the quietest stories say the gate responded not to light at all, but to breath. Human breath, slow, unhurried. A breath drawn with respect for things older than oneself. The keepers would approach at dusk because that was the hour their hearts were calmest, and the gate recognized calm. Tonight, we step softly into that circular hall, letting its forgotten warmth draw us inward, like hands guiding us gently into dream space. Imagine entering a stone chamber just after dusk, your footsteps echoing in a slow, unhurried rhythm. The chamber is perfectly round, its walls curved like the inside of a great bowl carved from clay, red stone. Pillars rise from the floor like ancient tree trunks, tall, worn smooth, their surfaces carved with symbols so old that dust has softened their edges into gentle shadows. Wind sighs through thin cracks overhead, bringing with it the scent of sand and distant rain. The air vibrates faintly, as though holding the memory of a long-faded hum. In the centre of the chamber lies a ring, a circle of shallow indentations in the stone, each one once filled with flame. These were the flares that marked the seasons. Not seasons of weather, not seasons of the earth, but seasons of the heart. The keepers believed that the human spirit moved through cycles, moments of brightness, moments of quietness, moments of change, moments of rest. And they kindled their flames not to worship, but to witness. We step into the chamber centre and feel the stillness gather around us. The stone beneath our feet is cool. Dust lies soft, like settled breath. This is a place where emotions once had shape, where feelings once glowed in firelight, where the inner world of a community was traced in flame. The keepers tended 4 primary flames. Not great bonfires, not towering torches, but soft, palm-sized fires placed in stone cups along the ring. Each represented a season of the soul. It marked beginnings, moments when hearts felt light, when inspiration fluttered, like a bird testing its wings. Its fire burned upright, calm and steady, not fierce but full of promise. Keepers lit this flame with quiet ceremony, touching its glow with fingertips, as though greeting a newborn morning. This was the time of abundance, not material wealth, but emotional richness. Connections strengthened, thoughts grew fruitful. The flame danced in broad curves, its light spilling warmly across the chamber. People would gather here to sit in silence together, their shadows meeting gently on the floor. This was not an ending, it was a gentle descent, a drifting inward, a quieting. The flame dimmed during this season, its edges soft, its movement slow, as though conserving its own breath. Those who came to the chamber in such times sat with the flame without asking it to brighten. It taught acceptance, the kind that comes with letting go. This was the darkest flame, a quiet ember that barely flickered. But its darkness was not despair, it was peace, a waiting, a dormancy. The keepers believed that every soul needed a time of deep stillness before it could rise again. They tended this flame most tenderly, cupping their hands near it as if warming an old, tired friend. The circular hall was more than ritual. It was a sanctuary for honest feeling. People did not come here to perform, nor to confess. They simply arrived when they needed to, letting their breath align with the flame that matched their season. A young traveller might sit beside the bright flame in a moment of new beginnings. An elder might rest beside the dim ember during a season of quiet closure. A grieving mother might place her palm over the flame of withering and feel its steady acceptance. The hall did not judge. The fires did not instruct. They simply reflected, as all gentle things do. Over many years, the flares created a collective map of the emotional life of this community. Bright periods left soot trails arching higher along the pillars. Quiet seasons left only faint whispers of ash along the chamber floor. Even now, traces of these patterns remain, subtle but present. A language of scorch, mark and dust etched into stone. But as in all stories of this temple, there came a time when footsteps grew fewer and voices softened into silence. The keepers aged. Children left to chase horizons beyond the valley walls. The fires dimmed slowest of all, as though reluctant to surrender their gentle duties. One by one, the flares cooled. Some lingered as embers for many nights. Others sank into ash quietly, like a breath released without regret. The last keeper was said to have sat in the chamber, alone with all 4 flames extinguished. They placed their palms over the cold stone bowls and whispered a final acknowledgement. Every season returns. And then they left the chamber, not in sorrow, but in reverent acceptance. The flames had completed their cycle. Their meaning had lived fully, and their silence was simply another season. Now, as we stand in the echoing quiet of this circular hall, we feel the presence of those old fires, not in heat, but in memory. The pillars cast long shadows beneath the dim evening light. Dust drifts in slow spirals, mirroring the flames that once danced here. Beneath the ancient temple of the sleeping fire, such a place exists. A staircase carved into the earth, smoothened by centuries of bare feet, leads downward into a chamber where a single furnace once lived, small, circular, and strangely alive. Not alive in the way flames roar or heat devours, but alive in the way whispers drift, soft, persistent, and more felt than heard. Tonight we descend those steps together, slowly, carefully, letting the quiet deepen with each breath. Imagine standing at the top of a narrow stairwell carved from cool grey stone. The air here feels different, colder than the hall above, yet carrying a faint warmth that seems to come from nowhere. Faint grooves run along each step where countless feet once descended, some shallow, some deeper as though lingering weight had shaped the stone itself. Spider, thin cracks run across the walls, catching flecks of dusk light like threads of silver. A lantern hangs forgotten on a rusted hook, its glass cloudy with soot. Through it, you can almost imagine the faint waver of flame guiding the keepers downward in nights, long dissolved into dust. With each step you take, the sound of the world above fades, the wind, the distant calls of nightbirds, even your own breath seems to echo back at you more softly. The stairwell curves gently, then curves again, until the last sliver of sky disappears behind you. And ahead, your path opens into a round chamber, cooled by time and silence. This is where the whisper furnace lives. The first thing you notice about the chamber is its shape, circular perfectly so. Not accidental, not eroded into form, but carved with intention. The walls curve around you like the inside of a great ear, designed to catch sound, guide it, and let it linger. The floor dips gently toward the center, where the furnace rests. A waste, high stone vessel, darkened with soot and layered with fine dust that shimmers faintly in the thin light. Even now, after centuries without fire, the furnace looks warm, as though memory alone is enough to heat stone. You step closer. Something hums very softly, a faint vibration hidden within the silence. Not enough to be called a sound, but enough to be felt beneath your ribs. This is what the keepers spoke of. The flame that once burned here did not roar, it did not crackle, it whispered. Keepers said it spoke in sighs, in murmurs, in thread, thin sounds like breath brushing against hollow bone. No word could be discerned, yet those who listened claimed to understand it, not through meaning, but through feeling. The whisper furnace, they said, carried the gentle voice of memory. Not one memory, but many layered, interwoven, like embers sharing heat in a single bed of coals. The keepers would come in pairs or slowly forming circles when nights felt heavy or when the world above seemed too noisy, too bright, too full. They would descend the steps barefoot, their soles brushing stone with a reverence that softened every footfall. Around the furnace, they would sit cross-legged, back straight, hands resting gently on their knees. They never lit torches, they never brought lamps. The only light allowed in this room was the whispering flame itself, low, soft, glowing like a thought on the edge of waking. As they sat, the flame's murmur would fill the chamber. Some nights it sighed like wind brushing tall grass. Some nights it pulsed as though breathing slowly. Some nights it fluttered in short, uneven rhythms that made keepers place their palms over their hearts, without knowing why. Listening here was not an act of hearing, it was an act of remembering, not one's own life, but something older, something carried through flame and breath for generations. A language without words, a story without form, a memory without owner. Among the softer legends, there is one often told to children born in the valley. It says that long ago, when sorrow settled over the temple, like a thick winter fog, a grieving keeper descended alone into the whisper, furnace chamber. They sat in silence, racked by a sadness too heavy for words. The flame flickered erratically at first, mirroring their unsteady breath. But gradually, the flame steadied, drawing into a slow, pulse-like glow, and the keeper felt something shift, not in the world, but within themselves. The whispering flame did not erase grief. It simply made space for it, a warm chamber in which sorrow could rest without consuming everything. It is said the keeper left that room not cured, but soothed. Their grief threaded gently into the hum of the flame, carried by it in a way the heart alone could not hold. This is why the keepers returned, night after night, year after year, not for prophecy, nor wisdom, nor command, but for the quiet companionship of a flame that knew how to listen. As the temple above changed, as footfalls grew fewer and chambers cooled with the passing of generations, the whisper furnace too, begged. The people who once lived near its base did not fear this breath. They listened to it as children might listen to the soft rumble of a guardian sleeping nearby. For generations, the keepers of the temple fire made a pilgrimage to this mountain's summit every 10th year. They climbed not to seek power, nor prophecy, but permission. The mountain wind, they believed, was needed to renew the ancient flame. And on the night we returned to now, they climbed as they always had, slowly, reverently, lanterns cupped against the approaching dark. Only this time, the mountain did not receive them, nor their flame tonight. We ascend with them, step by step, into that quiet refusal. Imagine twilight folding itself gently over the valley, its colours slipping from clay, golden to pale silver, blue. Along the narrow path that winds toward the mountain, a procession moves, a column of soft, flickering lanterns, carried by hands steady with ritual. The mountain rises before them in a silhouette of immense calm. Its ridges are softened by dusk, its shadow stretching long across the ground, like a great sleeping animal. Wind brushes the lower slopes, rustling dry grass and stirring dust into thin spirals. But higher up, where the keepers are headed, the air grows strangely still, as though the mountain has drawn in a breath and forgotten to let it go. The keepers feel this stillness, each in their own quiet way. Yet none turn back, their embers glow in small clay lanterns, each flame a thread of warmth, connecting them to the ancient temple below. Step by step, they ascend. The light fades, the sky deepens, and the mountain waits. By the time the keepers reach the midpoint of the climb, the world has shifted around them. The air thins, carrying a faint mineral scent like cold stone soaked in moonlight. Shadows thicken across the path. A hush settles, soft, heavy, as though draped over the mountain's shoulders. This is the place where winds usually begin to rise. For generations, the keepers felt the mountain breathe here, a gentle updraft warm as exhaled breath, followed by a cooler current that wrapped their lanterns in protective spirals of air. These winds were believed to be the mountain's acknowledgement, its subtle agreement to allow the fire's renewal. But tonight there is nothing, no breeze, no warming gust, no stirring of grass or dust. The air behaves like stone, still, unmoving, refusing to lift or carry or bless. The keepers pause, lanterns trembling faintly in their hands not from wind, but from the strange absence of it. One keeper lifts their lantern higher, as though offering its glow toward the darkening heights. The flame should stretch, should lean into the mountain's breath, as it always did, but it stands straight, unmoved, unaffected. A flame without wind is a flame without guidance. Still, they continue upward. By the time they reach the summit, night has taken full shape, deep and blue, its silence almost luminous. The summit is small, a flat stone platform open to the sky on every side. From here, the valley below looks like a shallow bowl filled with shadow. The world feels distant, as though wrapped in the mountain's vast stillness. This is where the keepers have always rekindled the fire. Here, the wind should greet them with a soft, guiding swirl, a breeze that slips beneath the lantern's flame and carries its warmth into a new cycle of life. But the wind does not come. The flames flicker faintly, not in movement but in uncertainty. One keeper kneels, setting their lantern gently onto the stone. The flame within quivers, like a heart unsure of its next beat. Another cups their hands around their lantern, shielding it. But there is nothing to shield it from. Around them, the night is not hostile, only indifferent, as though the mountain has turned its gaze inward to dreams too deep to be disturbed. The keepers look to one another, eyes reflecting the trembling glow. No voice rises. No command is given. Here at the summit, words would feel heavy, out of place. When the change comes, it comes gently, not as a gust, nor a blow, nor a sudden extinguishing, but as a soft inhalation from the mountain itself, a faint pull, barely perceptible, like the mountain drawing breath through stone. The lantern flames respond as if recognizing this breath. They lift, stretch, shiver, and then fold inward, their glow collapsing into their cores like tired birds, returning their heads beneath their wings. One by one, the flames dim. One by one, they sigh into darkness. Not snuffed out, not defeated, but surrendered, in quiet acceptance of a will older than ritual. The keepers bow their heads, hands resting on their lanterns, fingers warm from the last traces of heat. No one tries to relight the flames. No one moves to protest. The mountain has spoken, not with rejection, but with gentle refusal. Tonight, the flame is not meant to rise. Tonight, we follow the slow spiral of memory back into the courtyard where she kept her silent watch, letting her wordless wisdom unfold in the gentlest of movements. Imagine a courtyard softened by early light. The sun has barely crested the eastern ridge, and its rays spill into the stone square like golden threads unraveling over smooth tile. The air here is different, cool still, holding a faint scent of burnt herbs that lingers long after the night's rituals have dissolved. At the courtyard centre rests a low, circular brazier. Its edges are charred, its basin stained with the soot of hundreds of dawns. Ash gathers around it in thin, feathery layers, carried by night winds and deposited like soft offerings. This is where the oracle sat each morning, not on a raised platform, not on a carved throne, but on a simple woven mat beside the brazier's rim. And here she watched the smoke. Some mornings it rose in a straight, unwavering column, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Other mornings it drifted sideways, curling in quiet arcs, as though guided by unseen fingers. Sometimes it spiraled wide, filling the courtyard like a soft fog that blurred the edges of reality. People did not come to her for predictions. They came to witness what the smoke revealed within themselves. The oracle's gift was not the ability to command smoke, but the ability to listen to it. She understood that smoke is honest. It reacts instantly to breath, to emotion, to movement too subtle for the untrained eye. The flame beneath her brazier was kept intentionally small, so the smoke rose in a gentle plume instead of rushing upward. In this quiet plume, she saw things others could not. When the smoke rose thin and straight, she would incline her head slightly, indicating that the heart in question was untroubled, that decisions would come easily, that no storm twisted within. When the smoke wavered sideways in scattered curves, she sensed hesitation, fear, or unresolved longing. She would trace her finger slowly along the pattern, as if smoothing knots in a thread, without ever touching it. When the smoke spread wide and open, fanning across the courtyard like a blossoming petal, she knew the person before her carried lightness, a readiness for change, a warmth the flame responded to. And when the smoke clung low to the basin, refusing to rise, she would bow her head gently, not in pity, not in alarm, but in recognition. For some hearts need time before their warmth can lift anything at all. She never spoke these interpretations aloud. Instead, she moved in gestures, small tilts of the head, soft smiles, a hand resting briefly on the stone rim. Her silence was not withholding. It invited others to hear the truth themselves. There were mornings when no one approached her, when the world was quiet, and only the wind visited the courtyard. On such days she would light the brazier for herself. She would breathe softly, slowly, letting her exhale drift into the rising smoke. It is said she could read her own heart as clearly as she once read the hearts of others. She would watch the smoke climb, observe its shifts, its hesitations, its moments of boldness, and its moments of retreat. From these silent mornings, she learned that wisdom was not something extracted. It was something revealed in the spaces where one simply allowed things to be. And perhaps this is why she became beloved among the keepers. She asked for nothing, promised nothing, commanded nothing. She simply saw. No record remains of the oracle's final days, only a single story that lingers like faint incense long after the flame has cooled. It tells of a morning when the temple's fire was already dimming, its glow weaker than in the generations before. The courtyard felt heavier than usual, the air thick, the shadows long and unmoving. The oracle lit her brazier as she always had, cupped her hands around the small flame, and breathed gently into it. But when the smoke rose, it did something it had never done before. It split into two tendrils, thin as threads, curling upward in opposite directions before meeting again in a soft knot above her head. She watched. The keepers around her watched. None knew what it meant. Even she, with all her quiet knowing, tilted her head in surprise, a rare expression that startled the younger keepers who'd never seen uncertainty on her face. But then, a gentle understanding softened her features. She placed her hand over her heart. She bowed her head, and she let the smoke drift away without seeking to interpret it. Some believe the smoke showed her the end of the fire. Others believe it showed her her own final path. Most simply say she recognized a truth too tender to be spoken aloud. By the next morning she was gone, not in death, but in departure. The keepers found her woven mat empty, the brazier cool, its ash undisturbed. She had left as quietly as she lived. Tonight we return to her final vigil, to the night she chose to leave the lantern, where stone meets world, where flame meets wind, and where endings soften into something gentler than loss. Imagine the temple at dusk. The sun has just dipped beneath the hills, leaving behind a haze of orange dust that floats through the darkening corridors. The walls are cool, their carvings of spiraling flames fading into soft shadow. The courtyard stands empty, its ring of extinguished bowls dark and waiting, like eyes closed in restful sleep. And at the doorway, where stone stairs descend into the world outside, sits a lantern. Its glass is cracked, its clay frame chipped, its wick thin as a frail memory. Yet inside, a tiny flame flickers, not bright, not strong, but alive. It trembles in the stillness, its glow touching the stone in small, uncertain breaths. The wind at this hour usually grows stronger, curling around pillars and nudging loose sand across the threshold. But tonight, the air holds still, as though honouring the last ember tended by the last keeper. The lantern waits, and somewhere deep inside the temple, so does she. It is said she was the final voice to whisper prayers into the old furnace, the final pair of hands to check the wicks, to stir the oil, to brush soot from the stone walls with a cloth worn soft by decades of devotion. Her footsteps now echo faintly as she moves through the temple, a slow rhythmic tapping that blends with the settling dust. The halls remember her. They curve their shadows gently around her form as she passes, like old friends leaning closer for one last embrace. She pauses at each sacred place, the circular chamber where seasons of the soul were once lit in fire, the whisper, furnace, where memories murmured through flame, the ash gate whose dusk, opening breathed in silent stories. Every room holds remnants of warmth, not physical but felt, as though the walls carry the afterglow of centuries of human hands, human breath, human desire to keep something fragile alive. She touches each stone with quiet reverence. No tears, no fear, only gratitude, for she knows she is the last. The final figure in a lineage that once moved like constellations across the temple floors. Her flame, the one she carries now, is not meant to rekindle what once was. It is meant only to say goodbye. The lantern she holds is older than she is. Its frame bears ridges of soot built layer upon layer from flames tended by hands long gone. She lifts it close to her chest to shield its trembling glow from stray winds. The flame inside is quiet, a soft golden bead dancing slowly on a thin wick. In this temple, flames responded to emotion, to breath, to intentions. And hers is an intention woven with acceptance. The flame flickers gently, as though recognizing this. She walks toward the entrance in the same slow, steady way the keepers once walked to greet the dawn. Each step deliberate, each breath measured, each moment lived as though nothing in the world should ever be rushed. The temple seems to breathe with her. Dust stirs at her feet. Shadows shift in the corners without sound. And when she reaches the threshold, the smallest sigh escapes her. Not sorrowful, not weary but tender. Like someone laying down the last piece of something they have carried far too long. She kneels, placing the lantern gently on the cool stone where temple meets night. Its flame stretches upward for a moment, as if surprised to be given its own place, its own view of the darkening world. She rests her hand on the lantern's cracked frame. The warmth touches her palm softly, a final goodbye. Some say she whispered words then, words too soft to be remembered, too personal to be carried beyond that moment. Others believe she said nothing, that she simply bowed her head in a silence as sacred as any prayer. The lantern flickers once more, as though acknowledging her presence, then she stands. Her steps retreat quietly, fading down the corridor until the darkness swallows them completely. She does not return. No record remains of where she went, or what became of her. Only the lantern remains, its glow trembling in the cool breath of night. As night deepens, the lantern burns at its own pace, slow, calm, unhurried. Unlike flames meant for ceremony, this one has no expectation, no role, no watchers to guide or guard it. Its warmth touches the threshold stones in a soft, fading glow. The wind eventually stirs, just enough to make its flame lean sideways, just enough to pull a thin thread of smoke from the cracked top of the lantern. Still, it burns. Some legends say the flame lasted until dawn. Others whisper that it dimmed long before midnight. But all agree on this: the flame did not die suddenly. It did not shudder or gasp. It simply folded inward like a tired child curling into sleep, its glow softening into the warm heart of its wick until nothing remained except the faintest warmth. Tonight, we return to that pale morning when the sun tried to wake the ashes left upon the temple's altar. We return to light, seeking something that had already chosen to rest. Imagine the temple just before sunrise. The world outside is still blue with the last breath of night. A thin layer of dust covers the courtyard, resting lightly on fallen leaves, silent stones, and the deepened grooves left by decades of footsteps now long faded. The air is cool, almost cold, and carries the faint mineral scent that lingers in places untouched by fire for far too long. Inside the hall, the altar stands alone, a low table of ancient stone, darkened by centuries of soot and layered with ash as soft and grey as forgotten snow. The walls hold carvings of flames that once leapt in brilliant arcs across old frescoes. But the carvings seem to bow inward, their lines curved like weary bodies leaning toward the altar in quiet longing. Then, light, not sudden, not bright, but slow, spilling into the hall like water trickling through a broken dam. A pale gold glow appears at the doorway and stretches across the floor toward the altar in a thin, trembling beam. The dawn has arrived, and it is searching. When the sun first rose over this temple, centuries before the ember dimmed, its light would strike the altar and the flame there would answer, flickering in greeting, casting warm patterns upon the walls, awakening the chamber with the murmured promise of another day. But now the altar holds only ash, cold, still, silent. And yet the dawn behaves as though it remembers. The narrow beam of light reaches the edge of the altar and lingers there, softening the grey surface, warming the topmost layer of ash until it glows faintly. For an instant, the ash seems to shimmer, not with heat, but with memory. Some say the ashes shifted that morning, as though stirred by a breath too faint to hear. Others speak of a thin curl of white dust, lifting from the altar in a shape almost like smoke, hovering briefly in the beam of light before dissolving into silence again. The sun continues to rise, its warmth deepening, its glow reaching farther across the hall. It touches the old carvings and makes them shine like gold leaf. It slides along the stone floor as though in search of footprints forgotten. It rests upon the ash with the insistence of a hand trying gently to wake a sleeping friend. But the ashes remain at rest. There are no keepers here now, no footsteps, no soft, steady breaths echoing through the corridors. Only dust, settled thick and undisturbed, holding the faint impressions of a lineage extinguished without ceremony. If someone were to walk the hall today, their feet would leave clear trails in this dust, sharp lines in the soft grey surface, like strokes of charcoal on a blank page. But on this morning, long ago, no footsteps crossed the threshold. Only light entered, only dawn. The temple that once woke with gentle murmurings of flame now woke only to quietness, its chambers unmoved by the sun's slow arrival. And yet, the stillness does not feel abandoned. It feels suspended, as though the temple were not lost, but resting, a great breath held beneath layers of soot and stone. This hall does not grieve, it waits. The ancient keepers believed that ashes carried memory, not simply of the fires that birthed them, but of the warmth that shaped the lives around those fires. Ashes held laughter, they said, held stories, held the soft weight of human hope. These ashes, spread across the altar in a delicate blanket of grey, hold the last sigh of the temple flame, and for a moment beneath the dawn's touch, they glow, not brightly, not visibly even, not in a way that could be captured by any eye or instrument, but in a way the heart can feel, if one stands silent enough to sense the warmth that no longer warms, the presence that no longer burns. The dawn lingers. It does not rush. It does not push. It simply offers its light again and again into the quiet room, as though hoping the ashes might stir. But ashes do not wake, not truly. They remember, yes, but memory is not a spark. Memory is a shadow of a flame that once danced freely in this space. The sun finally climbs higher, its light stretching thin across the altar before drifting upward along the wall. The ashes dim, settle, grow still once more. As morning grows, the light begins to shift, no longer golden and searching, but brighter, more ordinary, losing the tenderness that belongs only to first light. The golden beam that once reached for the altar recedes slowly, its edges softening until it withdraws completely from the stone. The hall returns to its cool grey quiet. The carvings on the walls fade back into shadow. Dust resumes its slow drifting descent back onto the altar, and dawn, gentle, patient dawn, steps away as though bowing to the ashes in a gesture of deep respect. No frustration, no disappointment, and tonight we walk through its waiting halls, unhurried, soft in our step, listening to the silence as though it were a sleeping animal, steady in its slow, deep dream. Picture the temple at twilight, not night, not day, a moment balanced delicately on the line between light and shadow. The courtyard is covered in a thin veil of dust that glows faintly in the fading gold of dusk. Columns lean inward like thoughtful elders, listening for something quiet and far away. Inside, a stillness rests, not emptiness, but a presence that feels like a held inhale. The great hall stands unchanged despite centuries of silence. The soot on the walls still frames the carved flames that once flickered in its glow. The air is cool, yet not cold, soft yet not dead. It is a silence that feels somehow aware of us, aware of itself, aware of time moving gently around it like a river around a sleeping stone. There is no fire here now, no lantern, no ember, not even a curled thread of smoke. And yet, the temple feels as though it is breathing, slowly, quietly, beneath the dust, waiting. We walk through the inner corridors, our footfalls soft, echoes rising and fading like distant waves. Every room we pass holds the faint memory of heat, the chamber of seasons, where flares once marked the shifting tides of the human heart. The whisper furnace room, its stone bowl cool now, but still humming faintly with memory sung into its walls. The ash gate, whose threshold still carries the lightest trace of soot, as though dusk might yet come and coax it open one last time. Even the air feels layered, as though warmth once braided itself into every corner, every carved line, every stone upon which keepers knelt to greet their quiet flames. We pause at the central altar. The ashes that once lay upon it have long since drifted away on the breath of forgotten years. Only the faintest grey shadow remains on the stone surface, a whisper of where the sleeping fire once curled inward to rest. The altar feels empty, yet not abandoned. Like a bed whose occupant has risen but may return before the sheets fully cool. There is a strange tenderness in this emptiness, a gentleness in the quiet, as though the temple has accepted the rest of its ancient flame without regret, but also without finality. In the centuries after the flame dimmed, wanderers occasionally found their way into this quiet valley. Some were nomads, following shifting sands. Others were scholars, chasing stories half buried in dust. And some arrived by accident, lost, weary, seeking shelter from weather or from their own thoughts. They entered the temple cautiously, expecting coldness, emptiness, a hollow ruin. What they found was something else entirely, a warmth that had no source, a softness in the air that made their breath deepen, an almost imperceptible glow in the darker corners of the hall, not light, but something like the memory of light. Some said they felt watched, but not in fear. Watched the way a sleeping animal registers a presence without waking. Others claimed they felt a pulse beneath their feet, a faint thrum, like a distant heartbeat echoing through stone. A few insisted they heard a whisper, not a voice, but a breath, a quiet reminder that something beneath the altar, something beneath the dust and silence, still existed, still waited. There are many theories whispered among the remnants of this culture, few written, most carried mouth, to ear like gentle secrets. Some say the sleeping fire did not die, but sank into the earth beneath the altar, returning to the deep warmth from which all flame is born. Others believe its last keeper breathed a final wish into the flame, a wish for rest until the world softened enough to hold fire without demanding from it. A softer legend speaks of the temple itself as a living thing, stone that breathes, walls that listen, chambers that cradle memory. In this telling, the temple waits not for fuel, not for fire, but for presence. A kind of visitor whose breath is slow, whose heart is quiet, whose hands approach the altar, not in need but in reverence. A presence gentle enough to coax a long sleeping ember back into warmth. We move now to the threshold of the hall, the place where light once met shadow, where lanterns were lifted and lowered, where the last keeper placed her final flame before stepping away into the night. The threshold stones carry a warmth that should not be there, a warmth faint as a memory, soft as the last echo of a lullaby. The temple does not reach for us, it does not call or beckon, it simply remains, present, patient, waiting not for a miracle, nor for a saviour, nor for fire to be forced upon it, waiting only for the moment when flame chooses, on its own terms, to rise again, gently, softly, from some hidden chamber deep beneath the stone. The temple's waiting is not longing, it is faith, a faith as old as the first spark ever coaxed from stone, as twilight das